Chapter 1, A Routine Disrupted. Paige Ward's alarm clock chirped at precisely 6:30 a.m., as it did every weekday morning. She silenced it with a well-practiced tap, her hand finding the off switch without need for visual guidance. Paige didn't believe in the snooze button. In her world, everything had its place and time, including the start of her day. With the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, she went through her morning routine. Shower, 7 minutes. Hair and makeup, 12 minutes. Choosing an outfit, 5 minutes, thanks to her meticulously organized closet where every item was color-coded and categorized by season. By 7:15, she was out the door of her cozy apartment, ready to face another predictable day in the quaint town of Stardust. Paige paused on the front step, inhaling deeply. The crisp morning air nipped at her cheeks, carrying the sweet scent of blooming lilacs that lined her street. She adjusted the strap of her sensible leather satchel and set off down the cobblestone path, her steps quick and purposeful. The town was just beginning to stir. Mr. Finch was opening his antique shop, the window display featuring a gramophone that Paige could have sworn winked at her. She shook her head, dismissing the fanciful thought. Mrs. Henderson was walking her corgi, Mr. Pickles, who barked a cheerful greeting. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Paige called out with a wave. "Hello, Mr. Pickles. Lovely day, isn't it, dear?" Mrs. Henderson replied, her eyes twinkling. "Perfect for a bit of magic, I'd say." Paige chuckled politely, attributing the odd comment to the old woman's eccentricity. "If you say so, Mrs. Henderson. Have a wonderful day." As she continued her walk, Paige couldn't help but notice the way the morning light seemed to dance across the quaint storefronts, casting an almost ethereal glow. Had Stardust always looked this magical? She shook her head, chalking it up to her imagination running wild. Her first stop, as always, was Beanstalk Bistro. The bell above the door jingled merrily as she entered, greeted by the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and warm pastries. Abigail Bellamy, the eccentric owner, looked up from behind the counter, her silver hair adorned with what appeared to be tiny origami birds today. "Good morning, Paige." "The usual?" Abigail called out, her eyes twinkling behind her round, purple-rimmed glasses. "Good morning, Abigail." "Yes, please," Paige replied with a smile. She could set her watch by this exchange. As Abigail prepared her drink, Paige's gaze wandered around the cafe. The walls were covered in an ever-changing array of local artwork, each piece more whimsical than the last. Today, a painting of a teacup riding a bicycle caught her eye, making her chuckle softly. Was it just her imagination, or did the painted teacup seem to wobble slightly as if actually pedaling? "Here you go, dear. One medium vanilla latte with an extra shot and a sprinkle of cinnamon," Abigail announced, sliding the cup across the counter. "Oh, and take a look at this. We're hosting an art show next week." Paige accepted the flyer Abigail thrust into her hand, her eyebrows rising as she took in the riot of colors splashed across the paper. The headline screamed in a font that seemed to shimmer, "Experience the peculiar art of Elliot Rhodes." "Peculiar is certainly one word for it," Paige murmured, her eyes drawn to what appeared to be a painting of a book sprouting wings. The image seemed to flutter on the page, as if the book might take flight at any moment. She blinked hard, sure she must be more tired than she thought. "Thanks, Abigail. I'll think about it." With a wave, Paige exited the cafe, her routine momentarily disrupted as she found herself still staring at the flyer while walking. She nearly collided with a lamppost, catching herself just in time. "Get it together, Ward," she muttered, shaking her head and stuffing the flyer into her bag. But try as she might, she couldn't quite shake the image of those flying books from her mind. The rest of her walk to the Stardust Library was uneventful, save for the usual greetings exchanged with familiar faces along the way. At precisely 8 a.m., Paige unlocked the library doors, breathing in the comforting scent of books and polished wood. She moved through her opening tasks with practiced ease, turning on computers, straightening already straight shelves, and preparing for the day's events. As she arranged the children's reading circle, Paige found herself humming softly, an unusual occurrence for her typically silent mornings. The tune was unfamiliar, yet it felt right somehow, as if the library itself was singing through her. It wasn't until she was setting up for the morning's story time that the first real hiccup in her routine occurred. A delivery man appeared, pushing a dolly stacked high with boxes. "Mornin'," he grunted, thrusting a clipboard at her. "Sign here." Paige frowned, accepting the pen. "I'm sorry, but we weren't expecting any deliveries today." The man shrugged. "Don't shoot the messenger, lady. Just doing my job." With a sigh, Paige signed and helped direct the boxes to a corner of the children's section. As soon as the delivery man left, she pried open the top box, curiosity getting the better of her. Marvin the mischievous mandrake? Wendy's first wand? Paige read aloud, pulling out book after book. These are all magical themed? She couldn't help but laugh at the coincidence. First the art show flyer, now this. It seemed the universe was trying to inject a little magic into her orderly life. As she leafed through Wendy's first wand, a spark seemed to dance across the pages, leaving a trail of glitter in its wake. Paige blinked, sure she must be seeing things. Before she could ponder it further, the pitter-patter of little feet announced the arrival of her first story time group. Paige quickly shoved the magical books back into their box and plastered on her best librarian smile. "Good morning, everyone. Who's ready for a story?" A chorus of excited voices greeted her as the children settled onto the colorful rug. Paige reached for her planned book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, but her hand seemed to have a mind of its own. Instead, she found herself pulling out Marvin the Mischievous Mandrake from the newly delivered box. "Well," she said, more to herself than the children, "I suppose we could try something new today." As she began to read, something extraordinary happened. The illustrations seemed to come alive, with Marvin the Mandrake wiggling his leafy arms and winking at the children. The kids were enthralled, giggling and pointing at the seemingly animated pages. Paige, for her part, tried to maintain her composure, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by lack of sleep. The rest of the day passed in a blur of issues, book recommendations, and the satisfying thunk of the date stamp. Yet, Paige couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Books seemed to leap into patrons' hands as if choosing them, and she could have sworn she heard whispering coming from the reference section when no one was there. By closing time, Paige's head was spinning with the day's unusual occurrences. As she was locking up, her phone buzzed with a text from Maggie, "Drinks at Beanstalk? I'm dying for one of Abigail's cosmic cocktails." Paige hesitated for a moment. It wasn't part of her usual routine, but she thought of the art show flyer, still tucked away in her bag, and all the odd happenings of the day. Maybe it was time to shake things up a bit. "Sure," she texted back. "Meet you there in 15. The evening air was warm and inviting as Paige made her way back to Beanstalk Bistro. The street lamps cast a soft glow, and she could have sworn she saw shadows dancing in the periphery of her vision. Stardust seemed different somehow, as if it had been waiting all day to reveal its true nature under the cover of twilight. Maggie was already perched at the bar when Paige arrived, her wild red curls bobbing as she chatted animatedly with Abigail. She waved Paige over enthusiastically. "There you are," Maggie exclaimed, pulling Paige into a quick hug. "I was just telling Abigail about my latest classroom disaster. Who knew that mixing glitter and sneezing kids was a bad idea?" Paige laughed, sliding onto the stool next to her friend. "I could have told you that. It's why we banned glitter from the library craft sessions." "Boring," Maggie declared with a grin. "Where's the fun in that?" "Oh, Abigail, can we get 2 Starlight surprises, please?" As Abigail bustled off to mix their drinks, Maggie turned to Paige with a mischievous glint in her eye. "So, any excitement in the world of Dewey Decimals today?" Paige hesitated for a moment before pulling out the now crumpled. As she made her way home, Paige couldn't help but feel that something fundamental had shifted. Her carefully ordered world suddenly seemed full of possibilities, of magic waiting to be discovered. She couldn't have imagined then how this simple decision to attend an art show would upend her carefully ordered existence, or how a certain chaotic artist was about to burst into her life like a whirlwind of color and magic. Paige fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, dreaming of books that flew and paintings that danced.